Have you ever really thought about the power held in a single pen? Especially when that pen belongs to the President of the United States. It's one of the most direct forms of power there is. An executive order can shift the entire country's policy, give new marching orders to federal agencies, and send a powerful message to the world. And it can all happen in an instant. But here's the thing, that power doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It has to operate inside a very carefully designed system, a framework that's meant to set some serious boundaries. And that framework, of course, is the Constitution. It's the ultimate rulebook for how power is supposed to be used, and it's the final judge of whether that use is legitimate. Okay, so let's get right into it. In this explainer, we're going to look at a few presidential directives. But our goal here isn't to argue about whether the policies themselves are good or bad. Instead, we're going to put on our constitutional glasses and see how these orders really hold up. Think of it as a constitutional checkup. So let's start with a classic. This is a tension that's been around forever, that delicate balancing act between keeping the nation secure and protecting one of our most fundamental freedoms, the freedom of speech. You can see the friction right away, can't you? On one side, you have a presidential directive focused on security, and it connects an ideology, anti-fascism, to political violence. On the other, you have the First Amendment, which is pretty crystal clear that the government can't just limit your speech or your right to gather peacefully. Now, the directive goes way beyond just talking about an idea. It takes this huge, concrete step and officially designates Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. That label isn't just for show, it's like a key that unlocks a whole new level of government authority. And here's what that actually looks like on the ground. This designation gives federal agencies the green light to do more than just prosecute violent acts. It lets them investigate the entire ecosystem around the ideology, the money, the organizations, the networks, basically treating the whole thing like an organized criminal enterprise. Okay, now let's pivot to another core constitutional principle. The next big test we're going to look at is the separation of powers, and specifically that constant tug-of-war between the president and Congress. This is the bedrock of the entire American system. You divide the power, you create checks and balances, and you stop any one branch from getting way too powerful. But the million-dollar question is always, where exactly are those lines drawn? And that's where things get really interesting. So, for example, take a look at this executive order that rebrands a cabinet department. The Department of Defense, which, by the way, was created by and gets all its funding from Congress, is now also authorized to call itself the Department of War. So it raises this classic question. Can the president just decide to change the identity of an institution that Congress built? The order says the whole point is to send a strategic message about American strength. But, and this is the really crucial part, the order itself admits that a permanent legal name change has to be done by Congress. It's a fascinating move. The executive branch is pushing right up to the line of its authority, while at the same time kind of tipping its cap to Congress as the ultimate authority. All right, if you want an even clearer example of this dance between the two branches, let's talk about TikTok. Congress passes a law, a big one, aimed at regulating the app because of national security fears. And that law sets a very clear deadline. TikTok has to be sold or it gets banned. But just look at this timeline. The president, using an authority that was actually granted within the law itself, issues one executive order after another. Each one pushes back the deadline Congress set, basically buying time while a whole different kind of solution was worked out behind the scenes. So here's the bottom line. Instead of just letting the ban kick in, the president used his executive authority to okay a massive corporate restructuring. This qualified divestiture plan created a new U.S.-based company with really strict security rules. The president decided that this plan met the law's security goals, but it did so through a complex deal instead of the straightforward ban that Congress had put on the table. Okay, for our final point, let's look at one more constitutional pressure point, that balance of power between the federal government and local governments. This whole principle is called federalism. The United States isn't just one single government, right? It's a collection of states and districts, and they all have their own laws. And that setup forces this question over and over again. When federal and local laws clash, who actually gets the final say? A presidential memorandum about the death penalty in Washington, D.C. puts this conflict into really sharp focus. So federal law allows for capital punishment in some really serious cases, but the District of Columbia, as a local government, has abolished the death penalty for crimes in its own jurisdiction. And this order doesn't mince words. It's totally explicit. It tells federal prosecutors to step in, take over jurisdiction whenever they can, and seek the death penalty. That's a direct countermand of DC's local policy. It is a really powerful assertion of federal authority right inside a local jurisdiction. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway here? It's that these orders aren't just simple policy decisions. They're actually live fire exercises in how we interpret the Constitution itself. And these aren't new problems, not by a long shot. The clash between free speech and national security, that tug of war between the president and Congress, the friction between federal and local power, these are the permanent, enduring questions that were literally built into the American system of government. And that's really the central idea I want to leave you with. The Constitution doesn't really give us easy answers. What it gives us is a framework for debate. The real answers get forged, day by day, in that constant push and pull between the branches of government, in the decisions that come down from the courts, and ultimately by the vigilance of everyday citizens.